The first thing she noticed was the silence on the radio. Every other Thursday, the channel out of Clover Bend ran a low chatter of truck engines, gate alarms, the bored back and forth of men who had nowhere else to be that morning. This morning, the channel was just open air. Then Clara Hennessy's trailer rolled up onto the truck deck, and the digital readout on the scalehouse window clicked to a number she did not recognize. 9 black Baldy steers. Her own beam scale at home had them near 1,200 pounds each, give or take what the steers had eaten and drunk since dawn. The printed ticket the machine slid out under the plastic finger said 1,400 for the whole string. 500 pounds gone. Not one steer light. The whole load light. 500 pounds that had been in her trailer at the bottom of the lane and were not on the paper now in her hand. She stood on the wet concrete and read the ticket twice. The wind came down off the limestone ridge and pushed a strip of blue plastic against her boot. Somewhere behind the low cinder block building, a gate clanged, then clanged again. The scalehouse door opened and the young man in a royal blue polo and a feed store cap came out with a two-way radio on his hip. Ray Mossbach, 29, married, starting on a Wednesday in May of '86 and never quite done with the job. He looked at her face, then at the ticket in her hand, and he pointed up at the corner of the scalehouse window where a yellow decal was pasted flat to the glass. Sealed and certified twice a year, he said. Stickers right there. State inspected October. That's 4 months. He gave her a small, patient smile. Like a sticker ever pushed a steer up a ramp? He meant it gently. That was the trouble. He meant it gently, the way a person means something when they have been told it often enough that it has worn smooth. Clara folded the ticket into the back of her spiral notebook. She did not sign the clipboard he was holding out. She asked who had driven the cattle out. She asked for the weigh-in sheet. She asked whether the same scale had weighed them out. Ray answered the way you answer when you do not want to be the one to make trouble. A door opened higher up the bank of metal stairs. Charcoal wool jacket. Oxblood loafers that had never touched a feed bunk. Silver rectangular glasses catching the low sun off the deck. A stainless clipboard tucked under one arm, a fountain pen clipped to it. Dean Calloway, 41, yard manager. The kind of man who learned your name in the first 3 seconds and used it like a fence. He came down the steps and crossed the deck toward her without hurry. I'll take it as printed, Miss Hennessy. The scale doesn't have opinions. You do. I understand. First sale after a death in the family. Emotions run high. The numbers never match what a person's got in their head. But you've been farming what, less than a year? Your granddaddy's arithmetic was a hobby. Ours is a business. Sign it, take your check, and go home before you embarrass yourself in front of buyers who actually know what they're doing. He held the pen out. She did not take it. I'll need a receipt, weighed in, weighed out, and the name of whoever certified that deck. Then those are my terms. She said the second line quieter than the first. Calloway's mouth moved at the corner, the way men's mouths move when they have decided you are a child who has wandered into a place of business. Miss Hennessy, that's not how we do things. Then those are my terms. He put the pen back in his pocket. She walked to the back of the trailer, dropped the tailgate, and let the steers back down the ramp in the same order she'd loaded them. 11 minutes. She counted them as they came off. 9. She shut the gate, climbed into the cab, and pulled out of the yard without a receipt and without a check. In the rear view, Calloway stood on the deck with the stainless clipboard flat against his thigh. Mossbach was by the scalehouse door with his radio to his ear, looking at the ground. At the farmhouse, the kitchen was the way Ansel Hennessy had left it, down to the pencil on the table and the glass he had used the morning he didn't come back downstairs. 11 months now. Clara's mother had thrown out the easy chair the week after the funeral. She had not thrown out the table. Nobody had the heart to. Under the bare bold, Clara wrote the arithmetic in a spiral notebook that cost 69 cents at the drugstore. 9 head, roughly 1,200 pounds each, 61 cents a pound in the market that week, $7.32 a steer, $65.88 for the load. She wrote the load number down. She wrote the ticket number down. She wrote the date and the weather. Clear, 52 at dawn. Ansel's beam scale stood in the back of the barn where it had stood since he leveled it in the spring of '69. 8 feet long, 3 across. Cast iron levers. knife edges set in brass bearing cups, a brass counterpoise on a notched bar. She had swept the platform twice. She had hung 6 50-pound certified test weights off the bar and watched the beam come level. She ran the cattle through again at dusk. Dawn and dusk, same order, same alley, same gate. The numbers landed within 5 pounds of each other. She wrote them down. Thursday morning, she ran one steer back to Clover Bend on her own. Came home with the new ticket, 1240 on her barn beam, 175 pounds light on theirs. 2 tickets now, 16 months between them. 13.9% short on the first, 14.3% short on the second, every single time in one direction. She called the Division of Weights and Measures in Frankfort. A man's voice on the line, careful and bored at the same time. The deck was certified, he said, sealed, inspected on schedule, last in March, tolerance verified with test weights, paperwork on file. What happens if a certified scale drifts between inspections? A pause long enough to hear the office air conditioner. That's what the seal is for, man. And the seal weighs the cattle? Silence. Then the same careful voice told her to take it up with the facility. Calloway called her the next morning. 180, he said, as a goodwill adjustment. There was a release on the second page, the kind with a line for her signature and a paragraph waiving any further claim. She let him finish. No, send me the March inspection report. 9 words. She hung up before he answered. The neighbor, who had been her neighbor for 40 years and a pallbearer at her grandfather's box, came up the lane on Thursday in a pickup older than the marriage. Walt Bridger, 78, folding rule in his chest pocket, black-framed reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead where they sat through every conversation he ever had, indoors or out. He came through the kitchen door without knocking, the way he had come through it for 40 years. He set a glass of water at the head of the table where Ansel's glass had been. He sat down across from her. He did not ask for the story. She told it anyway. When she got to the ticket and the 500 pounds, he slid his glasses down off his forehead and put them on his nose. I've seen this before. 1974. Different yard, same trick. Or same accident, depends how charitable you're feeling. He asked who last cleaned out the scale pit. She didn't know. He wasn't surprised. At first light on Saturday, they drove back to Clover Bend in Walt's pickup. He had the folding rule and a flat bar. She had a flashlight and her camera. The yard was quiet. Mossbach's radio sat on the scale house counter. The truck deck sat over the pit like a wooden table nobody had ever moved. They pried up a 2-foot square rusted hatch at the edge of the deck. 4 inches of standing water, an oil sheen, straw, cigarette filters, a labelless soda can. The smell of old rust and manure came up out of the ground. Sir, you need to get up off there, Mossbach said, jogging over across the wet concrete. That's equipment. Somebody's going to get hurt. Walt was already down on one knee. A truck deck, son, floats on 4 to 8 load cells above a concrete pit about 6 foot deep. Anything that wedges between the deck and the pit wall takes load off the cells. Whatever the junk carries, the cells never see. And what the cells never see, the ticket never prints. He ran the flashlight along the inside of the pit toward the south corner. He stayed on the flashlight for a long count. Then he handed it up to Clara, put the flat bar against the corner bearing, and eased a wedge of wet manure, straw, and pea gravel out from under the south edge of the deck. It came away pressed as hard as mortar. The south check rod behind it was bowed the width of a finger off true. Mossbach watched with his mouth slightly open. He said something about a maintenance contract. Clara did not hear it. She was holding the flashlight steady with both hands. Somebody profits, Walt said from the pit, from nobody looking underneath. He climbed back out. He straightened his jacket. He handed her the flat bar and the folding rule. On the drive home, she did the multiplication in her head. She did not write it down yet. She let it sit in her mouth like a bad taste. 9 head, a load a week, a year, a decade. Walt looked out the windshield at the road. 1968, he said. My old man hauled 11 head to the Rowan yard past the county line. came home with money for 9. He knew. He didn't say it. He weighed 40 40-pound sacks of corn, one at a time on the Rowan scale, and forced tickets. Wrote them all down. Took them to Rowan. Rowan wrote him a check for $460, and the yard boss was transferred to Louisville. He was quiet for a mile. Nobody ever said the word cheat out loud. Wasn't necessary. At the kitchen table, she opened a second spiral notebook. She ruled 4 columns: name, date, head, reported weight. She underlined them twice. It was a small enough pile to start. 9 steers, 1 ticket. The beam scale at her back and the flashlight in her coat pocket, and an old man who knew how to kneel on wet concrete. It was enough to start. The Monday after the pit, Clara drove to Bardstown with 2 rolls of film in her coat pocket. The drugstore on the square charged $4 and change to develop them. She had used the camera 3 times on the deck that morning, and twice down inside the pit. The woman behind the counter slid the small yellow envelope across the counter and said nothing about the pictures when Clara tore it open and went through them at the counter with her thumbnail. 12 frames, the open hatch, the 4 inches of black water, the 4 pier blocks under the deck, the south check rod bowed off true, her boot toe in the corner of the frame for scale, the 3 inches of packed manure between the bearing plate and the pit wall, the ticket printer window, the office date stamp on a Thursday last October. She wrote numbers beside each frame on the back of an old envelope in pencil and slid them back into the envelope. At the farmhouse, she built the file on the kitchen table under the bare bulb. Page 1, a printed copy of the spreadsheet pulled off her grandfather's farm scale, dated the morning of the trip. Page 2, the first ticket taped to the page. Page 3, the second ticket taped beneath the first. Beside each ticket, in the margin, the matching barn weight. 41 head across the spring and fall, an average of 63 pounds of daylight between her numbers and theirs. $1,140 of daylight on that one load. Walt came up the lane that afternoon. She had not called him. He knocked twice, hard, the way he always did, and let himself in. Read this and sign. He read it. He took his glasses off his forehead, put them on, read it again. He sat down at the table, took the fountain pen she had set there, and signed his name in block capitals across the bottom of the page. Walter H. Bridger, dated. He set the pen down. He did not look up. He looked older in the kitchen light than he had in the yard at dawn. 31 years I hauled to that deck. I watched the pad build up. I never scraped, I never asked. I figured it was somebody else's floor to sweep. He said it the way a man says a thing he cannot unhear. She drove the file to Frankfort the next morning. Certified mail. Green return card, 60 cents extra at the counter. The man at the window stamped the envelope and slid it into a bin, and she drove home with a small green card in her glove box like a lottery ticket. 19 days later, the reply came in. 1 page, state letterhead, the kind of language that has been past tense before anyone has read it. Petitions for out-of-cycle retest of a certified commercial scale may be submitted only by the scale's owner of record or by a licensed buying agent operating on that device. She read it twice. She set it on the table next to Walt's statement. She opened the stove and fed the letter into the coals and watched it curl. The Callaway letter came in August. She opened it, standing at the mailbox with her thumb under the flap. Cloverbend Livestock would not be in a position to receive Hennessy cattle at this time. Producers of your scale and experience often benefit from a season of learning before returning to a certified facility. There's no shame in being over your head, Miss Hennessy. Most people your age are. She set the letter on the passenger seat. On the desk in the front room, an unopened envelope sat under a paperweight. A standing offer from a Louisville buyer. $480,000 for the 240 acres. $2,000 an acre. 90 cents on the dollar of what the county said it was worth at the time. 11 weeks old. She sat down at the desk and tore the sale letter in half and walked it to the stove and fed it in too. The day was warm. The tin roof ticked above her. The kitchen smelled of old paper burning. She pulled Ansel's journal down off the shelf. Page 40. The line she had been carrying in her head without knowing it. A number is only as honest as the ground it stands on. She read the sentence a third time. He hadn't written it about honesty. He had written it about the ground, literally the ground. She opened a second spiral notebook, ruled 4 columns: name, date, head, reported weight. Underlined each column, drew a single thick line under the last one. At the feed store in Millertown, Del Puett stood behind the counter with his sleeves rolled and a coffee ring on the daybook. He laughed when she asked him. Then he stopped laughing and went around the counter and into the back and came back with a shoebox that had seen 4 kinds of weather. After that, the word went out the way word goes out in 3 counties, not on the radio, on the church lot, on the diner counter on Route 62, in the back row of the elementary school auction. Men who had chuckled on a Thursday handed glove box ticket books over without a word. A banker brought his in a manila envelope. Harlan Voss, alone, drove up the lane one Saturday morning with 6 years of paired tickets, his own barn weights on the left page, Clover Bend tickets stapled to the right. "He's been light every time," Harlan said from the kitchen door. He did not come in. He did not need to. She spread the pairs on the table and went through them one at a time. The drift started in 79 at 2 and 3%. By 83, it had hit double digits. Not one of the pairs ran the other way. Not one. Walt taped butcher paper to the kitchen wall in 4 wide columns: farm weight, ticket weight, legitimate shrink, residual. A 2-hour haul off grass and water will lose 3 or 4%. She gave them 6. The friendliest number in Kentucky, she wrote at the top of the column in pencil. The gap still sat at 12, 14, 15%. She left the paper there. The whole wall behind her chair became the rebuttal. She did the multiplication carefully, in pencil, in the back of the ledger. Clover Bend runs roughly 4,100 head a year at about 1,000 pounds each, 61 cents a pound. 13% off is roughly $79 a head, $325,000 in a single year across the deck. Across a decade back to 79, 8 figures out of 3 counties. She set the pencil down. The number was too large to say out loud. She said it out loud anyway, to Walt, on a Tuesday night with the rain starting on the tin roof. He nodded. He did not ask her to repeat it. Emmett Rowe, he said. Emmett T. Rowe, bonded cattle buyer, 19 years buying out of Clover Bend. He had standing she did not have. He was the door. She waited for him at the Caddis truck stop on a Thursday morning and walked him to his rig. She had the butcher paper folded under her arm. She spread the table out flat on the hood of his day cab and pinned the corners with coffee cups. He read it once. He whistled low through his teeth. This shrink column, that's the friendly number. That's the friendliest number in Kentucky. He read it again. Where do I sign? He signed at the bottom of the second page. Bonded dealer number, his signature, the date. He took his coffee back. I won't forget how you showed me this, Miss Hennessy. I won't. She went down the list, 14 producers after him. Small farms, big farms, a father and 2 sons who had argued about it for 6 months and come in together. By the end of the second week, she had 15 signatures on the certified petition. She mailed it again from Frankfort with the green card. She kept one signed copy in the back of the ledger under the spring scale. She taped the other to the wall behind the butcher paper where the residual numbers still sat, 12 and 14 and 15%, waiting for someone to come and look. On a wet Tuesday in March, the state flatbed pulled into the yard at 7:40 in the morning. State gray, 2 men from the division, a forklift, test blocks stamped with state seals, 1,000 pounds each. Stainless clipboards that were not silver, not Callaway's. The man in the lead had mud on his boots already. The man behind him had a camera in his hand. Mossbach stood in the scale house door. Callaway came down the steps in oxblood loafers. The statement did not greet him. Southwest reads light, the lead man said at 11. Southwest reads light at every section, 13.4% off the total, 4% at the southwest corner. Walt, who had driven up at dawn and stood by her pickup the whole morning with his hands in his pockets, walked to the edge of the deck. He did not kneel this time. He did not need to. The statement opened the pit. 8 inches of packed manure, hair, grit, hoof-scraped bedding wedged into the lever framework at the south end. The rod that had been bowed a finger's width back in October was bowed too. The bracket around it was jammed half shut. They photographed everything with a steel ruler in the frame and a timestamp in the corner. Calloway's mouth moved the way men's mouths move when they have decided the room is on their side, and the room has decided it is not. There's a maintenance contract on this, ma'am. We've had turnover in the yard staff. Frankly, this is an oversight at the operational level, and it's unfortunate, but I'd caution anyone against reading intent into a mechanical issue. Then, lighter, to a buyer who would not meet his eye, somebody who couldn't read a scale ticket 8 months ago. Nobody laughed. At 1:40 in the afternoon, the lead security seal was cut, bagged, and tagged. A red tag wired to the scale house door. Block letters stamped through with a state seal. Decertified. 8 days later, the report came back. 3 pages. The same numbers written in the careful language of an instrument that has, for once, been asked to be honest. 13.4% light overall. 4% at the south corner. The state seal had been broken between inspections. The scale had been decertified. The state opened a 90-day claim window. A legal advertisement ran in the Bracken and Mason County papers. Notices went up in every feed store within 40 miles. Producers had to bring their own paper. The producers who had never written down their own weights got nothing. Clara had 11 notebooks, ink dated, weather in the margin. The first claim was filed at 8 on a Tuesday morning by a man in a Sunday coat. The biggest one was hers, $41,000 short on the 9 black baldies. She set the ledgers on the counter, and the woman behind the desk put on her reading glasses and did not look up until the 3rd page. By the end of the claim window, 31 producers had walked in through that door with their own paper. $312,000, all told. Clara's name was first, and her number was the largest. The hearing room was a county hearing room with a folding table and a long flag and a clock that ran 9 minutes slow. The men came in one at a time. Each one handed over his notebook and his tapes and his handwritten arithmetic, and each one sat back down and waited his turn. And nobody laughed at anybody because by then, nobody was laughing. Deacon Pryor, the man who had chuckled on a Thursday at the diner, took the chair across from her at the end of the day. He asked how she had known to weigh the cattle off water in the morning. He asked what kind of book. He asked where she had got the spring scale. He asked in order. You weigh them off water in the morning. Same hour, same order. And you write the hour down too because the hour is half the number. He nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he has been told something twice by other people and believed it the 3rd time. He started a notebook that afternoon in the pickup. She could see him writing through the windshield. Other men asked the same questions. Where did you get the spring scale? What do you write first? How do you hold the flashlight? She showed them every time. She wrote nothing down. They went back to their pickups with notebooks they had not owned that morning. Walt taught her the section test 4 times in the first week after the hearing. 4 500-pound blocks, 1 section at a time. Front left, front right, middle, rear left, rear right. Any cell disagreement over 0.1% meant the scale had been leaned on. She ran it 4 times in the long barn under the bare bulb until he just sat on a hay bale and watched her do it. Then he got up and walked out without a word. He had not needed to say it. Any fool can put a truck on and read the total. Total's honest. It's the corners that steal. Somebody profits from nobody looking underneath. Calloway was transferred at the end of October to a regional post out in western Indiana. Compliance in the title. Charcoal jacket, oxblood loafers, chin lifted, 1 hand in the pocket. No handcuffs, no perp walk. A man is moved sideways when moving him down would cost the room a sentence nobody wanted to read. He was made irrelevant. She took her settlement check to the bank and then to Owensboro, where a closed grain terminal had a 70-foot steel truck scale for sale behind a chain link fence. $31,000 for the scale itself, $19,000 more for a pit that drained. The digger cut a 2% slope to a French drain he had drawn out on a napkin from the office in Caddis. Gravel sump. Weep holes at every cell pocket. The pit drained dry within an hour of a 2-inch rain. She checked it with a flashlight every Sunday morning. She kept a small spiral notebook by the pit head and dated each check. The hardbound maintenance ledger opened on the desk under the bare bulb. Ansell's format, page for page. The first sentence of the first page was in his handwriting, copied out in hers. A number you can't check isn't a number. It's a story somebody's telling you. She charged $3 a load. It covered the state inspection. The first neighbor's trailer rolled on at 6 in the morning, headlights still on, running lamps orange in the fog. By 2006, dawn traffic on the Hennessy scale started before light. Trailers nosed to tail along the lane. Same olive canvas jacket, same brass cattle tag punch on the leather loop at her belt. Same braid, only paler at the temples. The North soil test came back 18 months later on a piece of paper she tacked to the wall behind the ledger. Organic matter up from 1.1% to 2.9 over 22 years of rotation. Earthworm channels you could poke a pencil into. Water soaked in instead of running off. The lab sheets went into a cardboard box under the stairs in order, oldest on the bottom. She checked the order twice a year. The section testing spread. 4 county sale barns added it to their own weekly checks. The clause moved into buyer contracts. The feedlots in Ohio asked for it by name. A packing outfit in Indiana printed it on every purchase agreement in 12-point type under the signature line. Walt died in February. 3 inches of snow on the lane. Wood stove still warm. 91. His daughter sent an envelope up the road 2 weeks later. Inside it was the scratched steel folding rule, 60 years in his chest pocket. No note. Clara put the rule in the inside pocket of the olive canvas jacket. It stayed. She worked another 23 years after that. Sold the 3rd scale in 2015. Sold the 4th in 29. Sold the last one still standing on the limestone ridge in the year the apprentice arrived. 23 years old. Diesel mechanic's daughter from 2 counties over. Coveralls with the cuffs rolled twice. A flashlight that took 3 A batteries. 3 months of learning. Nothing else. Clara's knees had started to pop on her down the cellar stairs in 2028. Her braid was silver now. Same freckles, same birthmark below her left ear, paler than it had been, but still there. She knelt that morning in the pit of the working scale, lowered herself down on the steel grating with the flashlight between her teeth, and ran the beam along the knife edges. The girl watched from the top of the pit with her own flashlight off. On the 3rd bearing back, Clara said. The flashlight beam held. Right there, that's the spot. A 1/4 inch of grit in there will read light, and nobody upstairs will know. Feel that with your thumb. That's clean steel. Feel that. That's a film of dirt. There's the difference. The girl put her thumb on the steel. A scale doesn't lie on purpose. Somebody has to help it. She pointed the flashlight once along the south check rod. She pointed it once along the lever pivot. She pointed it once at the weep hole at the cell pocket to show the girl where the water went when the pit was right. She did not point it at herself. She climbed out. She reached into the cab and pulled out a cardboard box. Water-stained journals, pencil sketches of lever ratios in a hand that was not hers, the scratched steel folding rule on top. She set the box at the girl's feet. Clara's last line in the old kitchen, the last line she had carried for 40 years, was not one of hers. It was Ansell's. She had not written it about honesty. He had not written it about honesty. A number is only as honest as the ground it stands on. She held the flashlight out. The girl took it. Go look underneath.